Although the happy and perfect endings of Final Fantasy X-2 left some fans with cushiony feelings of a Yuna and Tidus reconciliation, I couldn't help but feel that somehow the writers were wrong to bring him back in this way. I'm not saying I wasn't completely unhappy to see the star player of the Zanarkand Abes back together with the new Christina Aguilera-ed-up version of Yuna, but personally, I felt as though his appearance at the end of Final Fantasy X-2 cheapened the ending of Final Fantasy X and subsequently cheapened Yuna's story in Final Fantasy X-2 as well. To recap, at the end of Final Fantasy X, Tidus' journey is soured upon finding out that he doesn't actually exist. It's something of a revelation in the story as we find out that he's nothing more than a dream of the faith as opposed to the living, breathing person he thought he was. As a result, if the party are able to defeat Yu Yevon, thus killing the Aeons that inhabit the souls of the faith would stop dreaming and he would cease to exist, which is indeed what happens much to the disappointment of Yuna. It's why Tidus, despite the negative flack he gets, always stands tall in my eyes as one of the greatest protagonists in the series. He sacrifices his life for the sake of a world he has no real stake in, never to return. It was such a noble act full of so much meaning on multiple levels, but then in Final Fantasy X-2, Yuna is offered a chance to revive Tidus through a deal with the Faith Bahamut as a result for saving Spyro once again. I mean, before we get into the logistics over the whole sent-unsent thing in the Final Fantasy X series, let's just think about Yuna's position throughout Final Fantasy X-2. In the beginning, she's excited and curious about the prospect of Tidus being alive. She sees a sphere Riku found featuring someone who looks exactly like Tidus trapped in a cage, screaming about a summoner. It seems legitimate, and I think a lot of us when we saw the FMV got goosebumps. But once she finds out the truth and realizes that it's not actually Tidus, but Shuyan, another man from Tidus' time, she makes a change. She doesn't focus so much on her personal journey to find Tidus anymore, and instead fights for the greater good of Spyro by defeating Shuyan and the monstrous weapon he has activated, Vegnagun. When she's then faced with the decision in the far plane to bring back Tidus, it almost feels like she had completely forgot that he was there. A sort of, oh yeah, well, sure, I'll take him back if you're able to do that. What is she supposed to say? No, I don't want to see him again, even though the whole reason that I'm here is because I thought Tidus might still be alive. For me, it was a clear opportunity to prove to us, the players, that Yuna had moved on completely from Tidus' disappearance. That finally, after roughly 2 years of pining, she was confident and happy on her own 2 feet, surrounded by her friends. That she could accept that Tidus was gone in the physical sense, but he would forever be in her heart. I mean, I know as a hot-blooded woman myself, if somebody told me I had the chance to take my beloved back, I would say 100% yes. But still, my head just screams at this narrative decision. This isn't right, and as you can tell to this day, I still find it quite painful. My favorite ending in the game is therefore actually the sad ending, which can be obtained by basically doing none of the side quests within the game. In this ending, Tidus appears as a spirit hugging her as he did the day that he disappeared. She says how she was hoping he was by her side, but that she's no longer worried about him being gone as he will always be in her heart. This is such a strong ending for Yuna, even though it was a bit on the sad side. It showed her strength, that it's okay to accept death as a normal part of living, but that death doesn't necessarily mean the end. In a way, it actually has parallels to the struggle that Waka goes through with Chappu. Following his brother's passing and subsequent arrival of Tidus, he desperately wants to believe that somehow Chappu exists within Tidus, and even gives him his sword. But it's only once he arrives at the far plane and is able to see Chappu himself that he learns to accept his passing. So why? Why on God's green earth did they think it was okay to make a Mary Sue perfect ending for Final Fantasy X-2? What kind of message does that send to people in general? Oh, sorry your loved one died, but it's okay because you can just, call in a spirit and bring him back. Did anyone watch Full Metal Alchemist? Pet Cemetery? The Deathly Hallows? This brings me to my point of the video where I say plead that they please kill Tidus in Final Fantasy X-3, should it ever come to be at some point in the future, because I feel so strongly that it was his fate to die and for Yuna to carry on without him. Moving away from the games, we have the official Final Fantasy X sequel novel aptly named Final Fantasy X 2.5 Price of Eternity, We see that although Tidus is back, Yuna is unable to fit Tidus into her life once more. If you can remember in the beginning of Final Fantasy X, Yuna had summoner obligations to attend to, leaving her unable to interact with Tidus for much of the journey. Well, in the beginning of this, she's once again obligated to serve the elders who have not been able to acclimate themselves into society, and once again, Tidus is left behind, not even allowed to speak to her. He came all the way from the far plane to spend his new life with Yuna, and she ignores him. She didn't even talk to him until the next day. Like, imagine how Tidus felt when he was just thrown back into the narrative, just to be a wallflower. If he wasn't her guardian, he was nothing. I mean, this situation provides commentary on their relationship as a whole. While Yuna was on her pilgrimage, the only thing that Yuna and Tidus had in common was the fact that their fathers served together on a previous pilgrimage. Yuna was the only one, aside from Auron, who believed Tidus' story about being from another world, and thus wasn't as suspicious of him as the others in her group were. That's it. Although Yuna wasn't opposed to Blitzball, it wasn't her life's calling as it was to Tidus, and Tidus would never be able to understand Yuna's dedication to her religion. What do they have outside of the pilgrimage other than a mutual attraction? Aside from his relationship with Yuna, Tidus finds out that his 2 years of rest have made him rusty in Blitzball. He attempts to play against the once useless players of the Besaid Aurochs, and loses. Even if he didn't have Yuna, Tidus always had Blitzball, and now it seemed he couldn't even do that. What did he have to live for, really? Getting back to Price of Eternity, she's then challenged even further after her and Tidus are stranded on an island that looks exactly like Besaid, but in another world which has completely different aeons to the ones we know in Final Fantasy X. Tidus gets his head blown off by a bomb and dies. Seriously, it happens. Yuna somehow beckons him back with the use of her feelings and finds out that the power that she used to bring back Tidus, this time, has some limitations. If Tidus realizes that he was beckoned back by Yuna's feelings, he will disappear for good. It's after this novel that Final Fantasy X Will takes place, and Yuna pulls a classic by pushing Tidus away and breaking up with him in an effort to keep him from ever finding out the truth about his existence. This just begs for drama in a possible Final Fantasy X-3. We obviously have no clue whether or not he will die soon in the game, should they make it, but he has to realize he was beckoned back at some point, and when he does, Yuna will finally have to cope with her grief and go on with her life, or they will try to create another loophole. We should also mention that in Will, all of the sent people in the far plane have been unleashed, creating a huge imbalance, and worst of all, the revival of sin. All potentially because Yuna beckoned back Tidus, but there again, this is all theory at this point. I know it sounds quite callous and mean, but Yuna is such a strong character, and as I mentioned at the start of this video, it felt like the fairy tale ending of Final Fantasy X-2 cheapened her development. I mean, in the first game, she was willing to sacrifice her life for the people of Spira, but why can't she accept that Tidus did the same for her? It seems a bit hypocritical when you get down to it. I'm allowed to sacrifice myself, but you guys aren't. It's actually something they ended up creating a parody of in World of Final Fantasy. She was also willing to accept Tidus' passing until Riku told her that he might still be alive. And even upon finding this out, once they realize it's actually Shuyan, she doesn't just carry on pining for Tidus and cursing the fact it wasn't him. She focuses on the job she has to do. And it's why I feel it's best if Tidus dies permanently in any future material. He had his development, and in Final Fantasy X, his story had a natural, emotional, and meaningful conclusion. It was so depressing to find that Tidus, once again, doesn't fit in Yuna's life, so much so that literally hours after she had him back, she ignored him and then refused to kiss him multiple times. I feel as though everything that's happened since has just diminished the impact and diluted both their story arcs, not to mention their relationship. So how do you all feel now about Square Enix's decision to bring Tidus back? Do you think that the stakes in Final Fantasy X Will are interesting enough for you to want a X-3? Let us know in the comments below. Also, if you'd like to support our channel and also increase your chances in the giveaways, please be sure to head on over to our Patreon at patreon.com/FFunion. These awesome folks have already done so why not join them? Thanks for watching, guys. This is Lauren signing out. See you next time.